Hello. So this is the painting process and also final bits of construction of a mask that I made for a friend of mine. We did sort of an art exchange. She made me this sort of drawing thing, and I made this mask. And she had asked for something with like a floral kind of plant theme, and the idea that I came up with, um, as you'll see in this, well, I don't know how apparent it is, but um, I decided to make sort of what looks like a kind of like a rotten old fence, or like a section of rotten old fence with holes and like it's all jagged around the edges. And then growing out from the sort of cracks in the fence are little bits of ivy, and then behind it there you'll see are these sort of blades of grass, and they're actually the sort of the leaves of a kind of lily that's in our backyard. I think it's like a tiger lily or something. It's got these bright orange flowers, and that was the kind of flower that my friend requested. But yeah, popping up now, um, you'll see these are the first little ivy leaves, and I did actually film myself gluing the ivy leaves on, which was literally just putting wood glue on the back of a leaf, wood glue on the mask, and then holding them in place for half an hour. But um, nothing happens in those clips, so I just decided not to include them. So yeah, here's more leaves magically appearing and then getting painted in. The whole mask, like the body of it and all of the separate leaves, are all paper mache. I decided to paper mache the leaves separately because otherwise there would have been no way to get the paper mache off of the clay. But yeah, so the whole thing's paper mache. I started with a sculpt of modeling clay, and there was some wire used to get the blades of grass to stand up straight, and also to get the flower petals to be the correct shape, which you'll see coming up in a moment. Yeah, so these are all the individual flower petals. What I usually do is kind of a rule with any of the paper mache masks that I make is once they're made, I will coat any of the bits that are going to be seen with a layer of white paint, and then any of the bits that are not going to be seen with a layer of glue, just some PVA glue. Um, but yeah, here we're getting into starting to add the colors to the flower petals. There's 6 petals. There's 2 different sizes of petal because the tiger lilies are just kind of a complex shape. There's sort of 2 layers of petals to the flowers, so you'll notice that's why some of the petals are a lot smaller than the others. Here is an example of me not knowing how to frame shots. So you'll know this whole process took several days, and because I had to wait for paint to dry and wait for glue to dry, and I just did other things. Um, so, but yeah, this shot didn't really work because you can't see what's going on most of the time. But basically, we're just adding the details to the flower petals. So adding some yellow and some red, and just getting all the little detail bits um, on there. And in case you're wondering, I just use acrylic paints for everything um, because it's lasts a long time. It's relatively cheap. They don't take as long to dry as oils. Um, yeah, and they keep moisture out of the paper mache, which is very important. Um, all right, so this is the sort of beginning to construct um, the flower. And so I decided to use a sort of wire mesh to make little sort of pockets to stick the petals in. And I decided to construct it in 2 phases. So I first construct the inner layer of larger petals. You'll see I try several iterations of wire, um, sort of like things that eventually I got it. And then once the petals were all held in with wire, I then sort of sealed them in with a layer with a bunch of wood glue. You'll notice I used just a lot of glue throughout this. Oh, that was when my tripod just fell over because real good at this. These petals, the little petals, I just got lazy and attached with super glue, um, and then I didn't trust the super glue to hold entirely, so I also added more wood glue and more wire mesh. Um, and then after that, kind of covered over all the mesh with white gaff tape because as a theater kid, you kind of just learn that gaff tape solves all problems. And then I, of course, covered the gaff tape with more glue. Um, oh, and here is, so if you have ever seen like a tiger lily before, you'll notice they have these 7 little sticky outy bits. I think they're, maybe it's the stamen. I don't know. I don't know flower parts very well. But the 7 bits, little sticky outy bits I decided to make out of metal wire, um, which I'm just now, I bent into shape and then I also dipped them into glue so that the paint would have something to stick onto later. And then, yeah, this is just adding more gaff tape. I really wanted to cover all of the wire mesh because I didn't want the flower to look weird and lumpy inside. So I'm adding gaff tape and then, of course, more glue to give the paint something to stick to. Yeah, so here's adding the first, the little base layer of white paint onto the little sticky outy bits in the middle. You'll also notice throughout this that various mugs of hot beverages just sort of appear. I probably drank a few gallons of tea and maybe a gallon of hot chocolate and chai throughout this process. You'll also notice I just broke my rule of painting directly onto glue instead of painting onto white paint, but and also uh, I painted the back of the flower, which was a waste of time, which you'll see later. Anyway, this is adding the sort of the colors to the sticky outy bits in the middle, and they do this interesting thing where they start bright yellow at the bottom, sort of like the flower, and then they blend into an orange, and then at the very top they sort of then fade into this almost white, this like really faded orange up at the top, and then once you get to the part that's bent, um, there's kind of a black underside, and the top of that is yellow. It's where like the pollen would be. And then you'll notice the one doesn't have the bend, it's just like this straight pole, and they have that. There's 6 that are sort of curvy, and then I have the little puffs of pollen at the top, and then there's one that's just sort of straight and has just a weird little white nub at the top. And I kind of thought that I just found like a broken flower when I was looking in our backyard for references, but nope, that's just how these tiger lilies do, I guess. Um, so yeah, now that I've got all of these bits of wire sort of painted and set aside to dry, um, I move along. Oh, there was a cool little camera pan that I did entirely by accident, but I very much liked it. That was just the tripod kind of sliding. And so yeah, here's attaching all the little sticky outy bits to the rest of the flower, which I did, of course, with gaff tape, and then just, a lot of wood glue to fill in the gaps and just sort of seal everything in. But then, of course, this shape is not the shape of the flower, so I went around with some wire mesh and sort of built it out a little bit. I also got kind of lazy in this part and forgot to look at a reference photo to get the shape of what the back of the flower looks like, so it's not super accurate. But, you're not going to see the back of the flower all that well anyway, so it's fine. And yeah, here is sort of removing the bits, the excess wire. You might notice that I hold my a napkin up to my hand a few times, and that's because when I was cutting the wire, one of the bits of wire flew up and jabbed me in the hand. Just got a little tiny cut, but it's fine. That's how art goes sometimes. Um, and yeah, so here's giving the base layer of white paint again to the back, and then adding the orange paint. And oh yeah, the like mesh sticking up is going to help attach it to the mask. Is kind of the idea. Oh, and here is the other example of very bad framing where you can't really see what I'm doing the whole time, but this is where I actually attach the flower to the mask, and it's going in this sort of knot hole that was already in the mask, and then is attached, of course, with just a bunch of wood glue, as is how I do. And yeah, here's the final product. It doesn't hold on to this mannequin head very well, but I think overall it turned out pretty nice. And yeah.